What's going on, everyone? It is the Durf, and today I am bringing you a great Warlock build that I am dubbing Frozen Lightning. This is a build that takes advantage of the majority of the artifact perks that the artifact itself was built for here in Revenant. It is going to be my last build series video for the current situation that we are in with Destiny before the release of Heresy. And yes, I'm calling it a situation because this season, if you will, had its ups and downs, and there was a ton of available builds that you could have modeled after so many different perks in the artifact. This one is probably long overdue. It involves great ability spam, very fast super recharge rate. It makes you amplified, and it takes advantage of one of my favorite exotic pieces of armor and a weapon that I have absolutely never featured in a build that you are going to hopefully like even more once I go through it. So if you do find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Stasis or an Arc lover, or just someone that's looking for a great build for Warlock that can stun all the champions with relative ease and give you incredibly fast ability regen and transcendence energy when running a prismatic class that does not require an exotic class item, please send them my way. I want to help as many Guardians as possible out there enjoy as many weapons and builds as they possibly can fit into their loadout screen and or their memory. So I want to thank you guys for a successful Revenant season. You guys have been incredibly kind to me, sending me good vibes, words of encouragement, lots of positive feedback. I've had more people join my Discord, and keep in mind, I will be putting a dim link here in the description so you guys can copy and paste it however you want, and making sure that I've got the chapters sorted out so you guys can start wherever you need to in the video and get the information you need and get back out there and enjoy it for the last remaining week of Revenant. So without further ado, let's get on into it. So for this setup, we're going with the Prismatic Warlock. The Warlock subclass super of choice is the Winter's Wrath. Now ordinarily, I'm not the biggest fan of this roaming super. However, it's going to pair very nicely once we add in the weapons and the fragments, as well as our exotic armor. You're going to be able to take this into virtually any kind of content with very high confidence that you can attack and defeat any enemy that comes at you. And you can do so with pretty fast reflexes as well, so you can afford to be aggressive with this build, which is not something I'm ordinarily going to talk about when it comes to a Stasis Warlock. Typically when I think of aggressive Stasis builds, I'm thinking more like Hunter and Titan. Titan for the obvious reasons, and Hunter because you can move a little bit faster. But with this build, you're going to see just how smooth this can be and how helpful it can be if you like being a supporting aspect in your fire team. This is going to help your entire fire team once I put it all together. So don't be weary because of the super. The super is only going to add to the support aspect. Abilities. You're going to want to equip the Arcane Needle, get that 3 stack of melee charges ready to use at a moment's notice so you can get some extra tick damage on enemies. For the grenade, you're going to want to equip your Storm Grenade. This is necessary to function as part of the build. For aspects, I'm back at it, folks. Feed the Void. You're going to get that bonus health and grenade energy regeneration with any ability kill, and believe me, you're going to be using all of them. Alright, staying in line with the Stasis and the Freezing, Bleak Watcher. For the second aspect, hold to convert your grenade into a stasis turret that fires slowing projectiles at nearby targets. This is going to pair well with our exotic armor, which I'm going to get to here in 1 second, but essentially you're going to be double dipping in powers here to give you both a frozen and a lightning fast attack speed at the same time. First up for fragments, we've got Facet of Purpose. I want my Orb of Power because I want to get my Frost Armor. More frost armor stacks means more resistance to damage, and I'm going to want all that I can get if I'm going to be attacking the enemies of the Traveler as fast as possible. Next up, we're going to have Faceted Ruin, a staple in Stasis and solar builds everywhere, but I'm taking advantage of this specifically for the size and damage increase in the shatter of a stasis crystal or frozen target, and there's going to be plenty of foot. I don't really care about the plus 10 mobility. I really wish something else had been put in here by Bungie to buff or even take away certain ability stats, but I'm not going to complain because, you know, my mobility was already waning at an 18. Next up, we have Facet of Courage. Your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. So when it comes to a big yellow bar or maybe even a boss, this is going to come into play and really propel you into extra damage potential. Next up, we've got the Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Because we're going to essentially be spamming our grenade in this, and we are running a darkness super as well as a main weapon that is darkness energy, this is going to pair perfect with the idea of frozen lightning. Next up, last but not least, Facet of Awakening. Rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. In this aspect, for this fragment, I'm going to be taking advantage of the plus 10 to resilience as it bumps me over to a tier 10. And I'm also going to be getting elemental pickups, and with a stasis super equipped, that means stasis shards, which means I'm going to be getting melee energy every time I generate one. So my main weapon of choice is going to be a darkness energy, which is going to be grenade energy back based on a previous fragment that we just went over. And on top of that, the stasis shards that I generate are going to give me melee energy. So lots of ability uptime for any of the abilities that you might want to use. For armor stats, pretty standard setup with what I do with most of my Warlock builds. I focus primarily on resilience and discipline, and I also got mid rolls as far as recovery, intellect, and strength. If I had to switch things up a little bit, and you can see these bottom two sitting had a 58 and a 67, couldn't quite get over that hump, but it is just a little bit irritating to see those higher numbers. I'm okay with the mobility at a 28 because I don't really care if it gets to that 3 tier or not, but these two hurt a little bit. But if I were to switch things up a little bit, I would probably take more away from intellect and probably dump it into strength or recovery. You really can't go wrong with either, and we've got fixes for both of those as well with the way that we've got it set up. For the melee, obviously you can get a 3 stack to the Arcane Needle, so you're not totally hurting on the cooldown, and you get bonus regen if you have one fully charged, to begin with. So you shouldn't really be burning through all 3 at the same time. And then for recovery, we have a mod on our class item that's going to help us get that up quite a bit higher. For our armor, this one can go either way with how you want to mod it. I recommend putting on a heavy ammo finder. Use the mod of choice that you want to buff the stats that you might be lacking in. And then as far as this goes, you're not really going to need a dynamo, an ashes to asset, or even a hands-on, because it's a roaming super and because you're going to be dealing a variety of damages to enemies. Assuming that you're doing activities that have moderate amounts of enemies, you're going to be getting your super energy back very quickly. So I recommend putting on an arc siphon as well as a harmonic siphon to stay in line with the idea of this frozen lightning build. For our gauntlets, you guessed it, I found another way to use getaway artists in a build that primarily doesn't have a lot to do with Arc itself, but we're going to make it a hybrid of both. Getaway Artist, convert your Arc Grenade into an Arc Soul and become amplified. The Arc Soul functions as an autonomous turret. Now, as you get kills with this, you will get bonus grenade energy back as a result of kills from your sentient soul. This will also spawn a Bleak Watcher turret at the same time because you are using your grenades. So you're going to get 2 turrets every time you consume one of those arc grenades. First is going to be the Arc Soul or the Sentient Soul, and the second will be the Stasis Bleak Watcher turret. As far as mods go, you're not really going to be needing firepower for the typical grenade final blows creating orbs of power because you're going to be consuming the grenade. However, I would recommend to put on at least 1 heavy-handed, or if you want, put 2 on. In this instance, I've got double harmonic loader for increased reload speed because the weapon that we're using for our main ad clear and damage for the regular enemies before we get to the bosses and all that is going to be stasis. So I want a little bit faster reload speed so I can get more rounds out as fast as possible. But you can't go wrong with either. In fact, I'll even go so far as to say if your stats are like mine and you want to boost your strength a little bit higher, you can put on a Font of Vigor and you're going to get those melee charges back even faster with all the orbs of power you're going to be generating. For the chest armor, pretty standard setup like always. Put on the harmonic reserves because we are going to be running a stasis heavy weapon. 2 damage resistance types of your choice, whichever ones fit the activity you're going into, or drop this and add a 3rd one if you are going into an endgame activity, and then whichever mod you need to take advantage of to boost your stats to the next tier, focus on that for this piece of armor. Next up, we got the leg armor. This one's going to be pretty straightforward because we're running the exotic gauntlets. I'm going to recommend putting on double innervation, but don't forget the rest of your abilities because you're going to need them. Throw on the absolution at the tail end. You can swap this out for a harmonic scavenger, but because we're going to be using an exotic primary, you shouldn't have that tough of a time generating heavy ammo. And then obviously put on whatever mods you need to get yourself to that next tier, whether you're lacking in discipline or maybe resilience or possibly strength, depending on your needs. Last but certainly not least is going to be the class item. Put on the mod that's going to put on the mod that's going to bump you to the tier that you want to get to next in whatever stat group you're lacking. After that, put on Reaper so that when you use your class ability or next weapon final blow spawns an orb of power. Make sure you have Font of Restoration on if you are lacking in recovery like I am. The higher your recovery boost, the faster your class ability regenerates. And then just like the other pieces of armor, put on a mod to get your grenade back faster. You can't double or triple stack your grenades with the arc grenade like you can the arcane needle. So getting it back as fast as possible with all of the other things working already towards getting it back as fast as you can is going to help you that much further. Alrighty. So Wicked Implement is our primary weapon of choice here. Now, Wicked Implement kind of shot onto the scene very quickly until people started experimenting with the arc portion of the artifact, and then it kind of, I won't use the word disappeared, but people got upset when they found out that it couldn't pierce barrier shields. I honestly didn't care if it could pierce barrier shields because Wicked Implement to me has always been more of a supporting cast style weapon. But if you haven't taken the time to level up your Wicked Implement and get the catalyst completed, it's a monster in the right situation, specifically lost sectors, endgame content, and higher end activity. Not necessarily because it's great at dealing with ads. It only shoots 180 rounds per minute. But because of the great recoil direction, the fact that you have Tithing Hearts, which comes in as while creeping attrition is active, destroying stasis crystals or landing precision final blows creates a stasis shard. The stasis shard returns to you and collecting stasis shards refills the magazine. This thing can fire consistently over and over and over again. If you are hitting your precision shots, you don't have to reload very often or even at all, depending on what kind of activities you're running and if there's breaks in between groups of enemies. The creeping attrition is further enhancing this weapon. Rapidly landing precision hits causes targets to become slowed. So when you slow a target, if you apply enough stacks of slow, eventually you will freeze them. This makes this a viable weapon for anything involving champions. You can stun overloads, and you can stun or freeze. It's not really stunning, it's freezing, but they affect both champions the same way. It freezes the overload and it freezes the unstoppable. Once you get the catalyst fully leveled up, precision final blows spawn a stasis crystal at the victim's location. That does not have a cooldown, by the way, and collecting stasis shards gradually overflows the magazine. So the highest I've gotten mine is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 24 rounds. That only happened once though, so you might not see it go that high, but you certainly will see it bump up above 15 on a regular basis. And if you're constantly firing it, you're going to be using it anyways, so that is a great perk to have on a weapon that's got a magazine that only holds 15 rounds. For the energy weapon, there's really only two choices to keep with the theme of the build. The first is Arcane Embrace, a fan favorite shotgun that can obviously pierce barrier champions with the artifact perk. This is a no-brainer if you're going to be going into an activity that you're going to be facing all three champion types. You're not going to be able to pierce the barrier shield with Wicked Implement, so it's important to have a shotgun on your hip that you can pull out, pierce the barrier champ, and quickly delete it off the map so it stops antagonizing you. Vol Shot is a staple with this weapon. People love this perk, and I particularly like the threat detector, which is increased reload stability and handling when enemies are close by. That makes perfect sense for a shotgun that I'm not going to be standing 150 feet away to shoot at an enemy with anyways. So put on your steady rounds, don't worry about the dip in range, and put on small bore because honestly, this is a very well-rounded shotgun. And oh, by the way, it's a 2-round burst shotgun if all the other things that were on this weren't good enough for you to equip it. The second option, and you know how much I love this weapon, you can put on a vantage point if you know you're not going to be using or having a need for barrier champ deletion. Vantage point can stun both champs equally, just like Wicked Implement, but it does it by applying Jolt to either champion. So taking advantage of an artifact mod perk later on in this build, you're going to be able to see that jolted targets take more damage. So just something to think about. Last but not least, the VS Chill Inhibitor from Vesper's Host Dungeon. This is an extremely fun weapon to use. If you aren't particularly fond of the role that you have, though, I prefer Bait and Switch and Demolitionist for the bonus grenade regen, as well as the 30% bonus of DPS. But if you don't like the role that you've got, and you've got a good hula, throw on the hula and you're going to get the bonus light transcendence energy if you've got the chain reaction perk on yours like I do. So two great options, and they're going to take advantage of the artifact as well. As far as the artifact goes, this is probably the most spread out that all the selections that I've made have been on any of the builds that I've featured this season. So we're going to start over here in the first column. The only thing you really need is the Unstoppable Pulse Rifle and the Anti-Barrier Shotgun. The reason that we're ignoring the Anti-Barrier Scout Rifle is Bungie made the announcement that the Wicked Implement was not going to be given the ability to pierce barriers because its intrinsic trait already had the ability to deal with 2 champions, and they felt that it was going to be too powerful. I'm okay with that because it's worth the exotic slot in my book, and there's good options out there for shotguns for when you got to get up close and personal for a barrier champ. So equip the anti-barrier shotgun, put the Unstoppable Pulse Rifle on, and move on. For the last perk in this one, I would pick Authorized Mods Melee because I don't really care about the grenade mods since I'm going to be consuming my grenade and using it for the turrets. One with Frost. While Frost Armor is active, Stasis weapons gain increased reload speed and stability. Stasis swords gain increased guard resistance. This pairs hand in hand with Wind Chill. Rapid Stasis weapons rapid Stasis weapon precision hits grant you a stack of Frost Armor. both of these work hand in hand. You're going to get the increased reload speed, and you're going to get frost armor, which means you're going to get constant damage resistance to all enemies. Down here, I've got Frenzied Hunger. Rapid final blows while Devour is active grant a bonus to reload and handling. So this double dips on the reload perk of the artifact up above. It's a good one to have. You don't necessarily need it. I guess it's sort of redundant, but I like being able to reload even faster than I thought possible. Next up, we've got Trace Evidence and the Thick of It. Rapid final blows while surrounded grant you an armor charge, and rapid precision hits or rapid final blows on targets affected by jolt or blind will generate ionic traces. That means you always have a chance to get amplified, but with the Sentient Soul, you're already going to be amplified. So what you're going to be taking advantage of is while you're amplified, final blows, if you use your arc weapon, always, or actually, final blows with any weapon while you're amplified have a chance to generate an ionic trace. So, and if you end up consuming that armor charge, if you have arc compounding, or no, not arc compounding, retinal burn, you know, you could theoretically blind targets as well as freeze them. So something to think about with how you have this modded. For me personally, I put on Curative Orbs instead, as well as Concussive Reload because I am running a heavy grenade launcher. But if you aren't running the heavy grenade launcher, or you have something else in mind for the heavy slot, take off the Concussive Reload and put on the Retinal Burn so that you can get the ability to blind enemies if you're running vantage points. Last but not least, Brain Freeze. This takes advantage of pretty much everything that Wicked Implement stands for, and then adds a chilling fog around the enemy that's frozen. That's pretty self-explanatory. You freeze a group of ads, and then you shatter the crystal, and it just ramps up the darkness transcendence bar, as well as your super energy regen. And Conductive Cosmic Crystal. Your arc abilities and void abilities and weapons with Dark Ether Reaper origin trait do bonus damage to targets that are affected by a stasis debuff. So this one is going to assume that you're taking advantage of your Bleak Watcher turret or the slow effect that you've applied from your Wicked Implement. The arc abilities are what I care about in this one because I'm going to be running that Sentient Soul, and I want to be able to output as much damage as possible. And when I'm faced with an enemy where, let's face it, one or two of my sources of damage are not going to kill the enemy right away, any extra tick damage I can take because of certain things that are going on with the build, I'm going to take it. And since I'm going to be activating that Sentient Soul pretty much as often as possible, that applies as an arc ability. So that is the build, sticking with the theme of Frozen Lightning. You can see where I came up with that. Obviously, that doesn't make me Einstein, or maybe it does because sometimes I do feel crazy. But either way, it is a very easy to use and sensible build for anyone who wants the benefits of stasis as well as some of the benefits of arc. Now, you could have made this with an arc super. The reason that I didn't is because I want the stacks of frost armor since I don't have weapons that are going to be as fast as some of my other builds. So the frost armor is going to give me a little extra damage resistance while I'm re-aiming my Wicked Implement, trying to be a little bit more careful with my shots, or if I've got to get up close and personal and deal with a barrier champ. So just kind of a thought process behind how the build kind of came together. And what I wanted to do for this final video in this season is make a build that I thought fully encapsulated what the full effects of the artifact could actually give somebody if they use them in a certain way. And I think this accomplishes that because you can still switch these out for other options. And Wicked Implement, if you've never messed around with Wicked Implement, it's one of those weapons you do have to get a little bit used to, but it's very easy to control. It's got great range. The reload speed is not terrible on it. And with the mods to the boost of reload speed, you're going to get your weapon back reloaded faster than if you were just throwing that on arbitrarily in a build that really wasn't made for it, if that makes sense. So, if you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you resonated with anything in this video that you think might help a fellow Guardian who likes some of these things that I've got going on in this build, please consider sharing with them. I would like to try to help as many people as possible. That is the goal of my channel for sure. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go straight into Altars of Sorrow, and I'm going to show you guys firsthand how fast your super can regen, all the ways that your powers are going to be able to help you. I'm actually kind of hoping that when I spawn in here, I'm not going to have many allies. So you can see that this class by itself, this build by itself, can absolutely carry you in a busier activity. And all you really have to do is just cycle through your abilities at a relative even amount. So I'm going to load this in here, and we're going to see how it goes. All right, so I just loaded into Altars of Sorrow here. I'm going to get started in trying to help this lone teammate that I've got. You can see I was already able to freeze an enemy, and you can see right off the bat I am generating stasis crystals with relative ease. My teammates can shatter those, or I can shatter those, and it's going to do area effect damage. Now, if you aren't a fan of stasis crystals forming in front of you, then be mindful a little bit of how you're doing it. In other words, if you're firing at a group of enemies, maybe the best thing to do, and I'm going to activate my Sentient Soul and Bleak Watcher so you can see everything in action. Maybe the best thing to do is fire at one of the center enemies in a group of adds, and then take advantage of the stasis crystal that way for the area effect damage. So it looks like I had two other teammates in that. I wasn't going extremely fast, but you can see I've got my super almost fully regenerated. I've got pretty good regen on my transcendence bars right now, and I've got my arc grenade regenerated, and of course full class ability. I didn't take advantage of stacking my melees because I did dump a couple of them into enemies, but you get the idea of how this build is going to function and what makes it such a powerhouse when used as a support weapon. It's kind of a support weapon and a support build setup, so to speak. But now I've got my super, so now with my Sentient Soul going, my Bleak Watcher turret going, you can see I am just shattering this. Well, he's dead now, but I was shattering that boss to death, literally. And all this is going to do is further help your team take down all the enemies that you might be coming across. You see, I've got a couple of aggressive players playing with me, but I'm not lacking in my ability. I mean, you can see how much damage I'm doing to these bosses that are affected, or these nightmares that are affected by both the arc and the stasis debuffs that I'm putting on them. And now I've got full transcendence energy, so I'm going to use that as well. Keep in mind that transcendence also uses a variety of elements as well. So you've got void, weakening, and you've got the stasis slow effect. Yet again, another way that stasis is being implemented with other abilities that seemingly perfectly blend in this prismatic build. So anyways, that is the video. I don't think it's necessary to take this into really anything else or wait until I get towards the final boss. Sometimes I like to be in the later rounds of Altars of Sorrow just so you guys can see how powerful it is. But you guys get the idea. I've got two teammates, which is a perfect simulation if I'm going to be going into a dungeon with someone from with a couple of members of my clan. I'm not really hurting for enemies to kill, and I'm not really deleting enemies faster than what my teammates can, keep up with. But you can see that I'm applying the slow effects on a regular basis, and just for the sake of it, I decided to use my shotgun on that. But I've got my full super back right now. I've got half bars on both my transcendence bars, and just basically I have a lot of ways to use the slow effect as well as the sentient turret, which amplifies you, to further your ability to get around the battlefield as fast as possible. And quite honestly, being able to spawn the stasis crystals and then shatter them right away, it's just a really good look, really good clean look for this Warlock build. So hopefully you guys found or something helpful in the video, or resonate with something in the video. You know, share it with a guardian who might be looking for a way to blend these two elements, or might just be looking for a way to incorporate some elements that, you know, we as guardians before Prismatic came out never really thought was going to be truly possible. But with the synergy of this build, you know, if you did find anything helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm going to be releasing lists for my rate of S tier weapons, which will be coming out after this video to round out the season. But go ahead, enjoy this build for a week until we get the new artifact and see what the devs have planned for us. I will see you guys next time. Again, thank you so much for your positivity, your support, and your kind vibes that you've sent my way, and words of encouragement as well as feedback. You can get at me on my Discord if you want to connect further, or if you've got questions, or you want to know about things that you could substitute that maybe I didn't include in this video. I welcome it all. You know, that's part of the beauty of this game, is that you can make all of these builds your own with just a few tweaks generally, if even that. So thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll see you next time, or should I say next season. Take care.